Welcome to our first project conversation series organized by the Hong Kong chapter of the American Institute of Architects. This is also the first event of 2022 for our chapter. We are extremely excited to welcome everyone. My name is Su Chang, and I am a co-chair of the Programs Committee of AIA Hong Kong this year. First project is a continuing initiative of AIA Hong Kong, for which we invite architects to reflect upon how their practice started and how that beginning led to the architectural adventures they are in right now. And tonight we are very honored to have Shi Zhou, one of our AIA members based in Shenzhen, founder of Studio 10, to join us and share with us her experience. It is extremely exciting to have Shi to kick off our series this year, not only because she has created a body of work that showcases both her design ambition and sensitivity to local culture and construction techniques, but also for her journey from the US to Hong Kong and now based in Shenzhen. This is a wonderful occasion to mark the beginning of many opportunities we are trying to create this year to engage our communities, architecture communities, not only in Hong Kong, but also in the Greater Bay Area. And the work by Shi and Studio 10 has won many awards, including the 2021 Architizer A+ Awards, selected as the exhibition of the year by Design Awards in 2021. And she has also been previously shortlisted for AIA Hong Kong honors and awards. And in 2021, Studio 10 has also been selected by Architizer as one of the 10 female-led firms at the forefront of architecture. Our event tonight will take the format of a conversation. After Shi's and her presentation, she will be joined by Damien Chen, founder of Matter Design Limited, also a member of AIA. And we would also love to invite all our audience to submit questions or topics you would like us to discuss through the AIA, through the Q&A or chat box on Zoom. And we also have Florence tonight to join us as one of our panelists. Welcome, Damien, welcome, Shi. Please start anytime when you're ready.
Shi, you have to unmute yourself.
How can I share screen? Because it says host disable participant screen sharing. Hello. Can you hear me? Hello?
Does it work now?
Oh, yes. Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Chang, for the introduction, and Happy New Year, everyone. It's an honor for me to be invited to share some of our first projects this evening with you. And I also appreciate the opportunity for me to look back and reflect on my practice, as well as the profound motivation and passion behind it. First of all, let me give you an idea of my background, which may lead to the answers to the question of why I started Studio 10. I was raised in Shenzhen, China, went to college in Beijing at the Tsinghua School of Architecture, where I received my B.Arch degree. Then I was accepted into GSD, where I received my M.Arch degree. These are some of the studio works from the GSD years, which took me quite some time to dig out while preparing for this presentation. I still remember my first option studio at the GSD themed over skyscraper and taught by Shi Zhou. In this studio, each student was asked to pick a familiar site in a dense and complex urban or suburban environment. And I picked an urban village in Shenzhen called Shi Zhou. Urban village is a unique urban fabric that scatters all over the city, formed through the rapid urbanization process. And the outcome of the studio was a skyscraper generated mapping and the translation of diagrams, which meant to maximize the occupants' accessibility to public facilities and their social interactions. And I'll come back to the urban villages later. After graduating from GSD, despite the economic recession at the time, I was very fortunate to have got a job offer as a junior architectural designer at KPF New York. It was my first full-time job, and it was also when, under the guidance of my colleagues, team leaders, and mentors, I started to get a fuller picture of the discipline and the practice. 2.5 years later, I decided to move back to Asia to be closer to home and transferred to KPF Hong Kong, where I spent another 4.5 years. The projects I have been involved in at KPF were mostly large-scale mixed-use commercial complex, high-rise and super high-rise buildings in urban contexts of high density. During my service at the Hong Kong office, I spent quite a good amount of time on site, as well as the in-depth research into materials, such as a certain type of stone from Italy or Brazil, its quarry, the stratifications, the blocks, slabs, and the finishes. It was then that I had developed my interest or discovered my passion in materiality and the tactile aspect of architecture. I also realized that of the projects I worked on, I was almost always drawn to the non-standardized and more intimate part of the project. For example, the low-rise podium instead of the tower of a project. I believe that such intimate aspect of a project, the placement and the touch of the material, the trace of the hand and the sense of craft, for me, is an indirect proof of our own existence in this world, which was also why I decided to pursue in architecture or design in the first place. So in 2017, I decided that it was time for me to further explore these aspects of the discipline and practice. And I started Studio 10. A practice was with only myself at the time, and now with a team of around 10 people. I had no proper office, but my own bedroom / studio until 6 months later, when I rented a studio located in a building renovated from an old factory in the neighborhood, coincidentally steps away from where I grew up. I had no idea whether and when the office will be filled up, which is why the office was designed with hanging tracks and lightweight movable partitions and drapery, so that it could be sublet easily to multiple parties to share the cost of rent if necessary. Fortunately, it was later filled up, and we have also added more desks now. And finally, we're getting to the projects. Here is an overview of some of the projects that we have been working on during the past 5 years at various scales and of different typologies. And today we'll be focusing on some of them in terms of their relationship with the development of our practice. The first project that I would like to talk about is the and I'm using I because it was literally myself at the time, was the design of the exhibition venue renovated from a factory building in an urban village called Shangwei in the Longhua district of Shenzhen, serving as a sub-venue for the Shenzhen and Hong Kong Bi-City Biennale of Urbanism and Architecture, also known as the UABB. The curator Wei Wenhuang, who was both a Tsinghua alumni from an earlier generation and a low fellow at the GSD while I was studying there, was very kind to have given me this opportunity. The site of the urban village itself and the factory building were both very typical of its kind, so typical that you could almost call it plain or boring. We surveyed the site carefully and have extracted some of the components typical of the industrial buildings in the urban villages, such as the corrugated metal sheets, the roller doors, the weathered mosaic walls. Then we reuse these elements in the venue building, but with a different new approach. For example, we have opened up the ground floor by creating a central passageway connecting the front and backyards of the venue, and by inserting independent kiosks with programs such as cafe, lecture podium, seating, and so on, and enclosing them with corrugated metal sheets, as well as closing it off with roller doors. It was possible to allow the rest of the ground floor space being accessible to the villagers during and after the exhibition. The point is that the venue should not just be an exclusive party space for the architects, but also a living room for the village in the long run, which I guess in a sense is a continuum of the GSD studio I did on urban villages in terms of maximizing the interest of the general villagers with limited given resources. We also explore strategies to restore the deteriorating mosaic facade of the building in the urban village. The mosaic tiles is the most common material used on these building facades due to its affordability. However, the pieces would start to fall off at some point as part of the natural weathering process. The most common treatment in practice is to scrape it off or simply to paint over it. We went with neither. Instead, we worked with the mason workers on site, drawing inspirations from the art of repairing broken pottery, kintsugi, also known as the golden repair, which treats breakage and repair as part of the history of an object rather than something to disguise. And after rounds of testing, we managed to have kept the pattern formed by the missing pieces by filling it with mortar, forming a mural which solidified traces of time and handwork. Additionally, we collected the pinkish fallen debris of the fallen off mosaic around the building and made it into terrazzo, which was used for new additions in the building, such as floor pavings and countertops. The process was documented and displayed together with the mosaic debris and terrazzo samples at the venue during the Biennale as a discussion and demonstration of a more constrained and sensitive approach to the renovation of these industrial buildings in the urban villages. Unfortunately, the building was later further renovated with a different agenda and approach by the owner. It was eventually painted over into a contemporary art museum. There are many lessons that could be learned from the project and things I wish I had done better. But as the project completed and got published, we started to form a team, first with an intern, then a team of 3, and later 5 full-time designers by the end of 2018. With our interest in the urban villages as the team was growing, but with no stable source of commissioned projects, we decided to try working on competitions, as many of their predecessors and pioneers had done in the early stage of their practice. Stacked Neighborhood was an open competition focusing on prefab housing for young migrants, the newcomers to the metropolis like Shenzhen. We had chosen the urban village as our site, as in reality, these villages are considered the most affordable, available, and convenient sources of housing for young or low-income migrants. The solution we proposed was to vertically stack the prefab basic living clusters of the traditional urban villages in order to preserve the sense of neighborhood and the organic and intimate communities of the urban village, allowing better ventilation, natural lighting, views, and privacy for each unit with upgraded infrastructure at the same time. We ended up as the Merit Award winner among many others. But I think the project meant more for ourselves in terms of the continuous exploration on the approach to design for a highly complex and dense environment such as the urban villages, enhancing its living conditions without compromising the intimate urban scale or the sense of community through, although in general, the scale of most of our project is much smaller than this. Later, we continued the research on the urban villages, mosaic facades in the project we have completed for the opening exhibition of the Pingshan District Art Museum. We have taken pictures of more shedding mosaic walls in the urban villages all over the city, then analyzed the pattern of the stains by processing the degree of darkness of the stains in the samples. A series of time-lapse diagrams have been generated, then translated into three-dimensional extrusions. We then 3D printed the models and placed them next to the corresponding two-dimensional images of the fallen of mosaic patterns in the installation for the exhibition. And viewers can pick through the translucent model from either side of the device. It is a device that records, reviews, and translates the subtle dimension of time in the urban villages into three-dimensional objects. It is a research project that was initiated during a real project, and the study still goes on today. We hope that one day it would be applied once again at architectural scale. While we continue to work in the urban environment, which we are familiar with, but at the same time quite saturated and built, we also start to work on projects located in the real villages, the low-density rural areas that takes up more than half of the country. In 2018, through the connection of a friend, we have participated in the renovation of the guest rooms of a guest house called The Other Place in the village of Pingle, Guangxi Province. The guest house was the first project initiated in this remote village by the client in the hope to attract tourists, thus boosting the local economy. Although the project was located in the rural area, it was technically not 100% rural, as the end users were actually urban dwellers seeking secret hideout in the village. We were commissioned to design two intentionally distinct types of interior spaces, as the view of the guest room is largely blocked by the adjacent buildings. We had to focus solely on the inside. One guest room type focused on the reality side, which in essence was about the available local resources of materials such as bamboo, recycled elm, and craftsmanship of weaving bamboo and their placement and ordering. For example, the concrete walls are finished in woven bamboo texture, while the custom-made pendant lights utilizes bamboo weaved baskets as shades to enhance the acoustic performance of the space. The other guest room type focused more on the opposite of reality, inspired by the Dutch artist Escher. We took advantage of the village house's excessive ceiling height to have created a surreal, infinite, and impossible space with the seamless transformation between 2D and 3D. Materiality was purposely downplayed here to reinforce the surreal nature of the space. The guest rooms had turned out to be quite popular. It has some of the highest occupancy rates among all the guest room types, and it also got us much media exposure. For example, it was on the Time magazine cover and had won us many awards. To look back 3 years later from now, it was the first time ever that we had worked in the rural area, and we were quite inexperienced. We spent a lot of time drawing every detail, but soon we realized that most local workers on site did not read drawings very well and rely heavily on the designers to verbally explain every design intent and detail on site. So a photorealistic rendering are usually more helpful than technical drawings. At some point, we decided that it was necessary for one of the designers to stay in the village for a period of time to make sure that the defects are rectified and the design intent was understood and executed right. Soon in 2019, we had more opportunities to work on projects in the rural areas, this time in Zhou, Henan Province, central China. The party secretary at the time, Mr. Guo, was a visionary young official and had invited a few young architects to design a series of small projects for the county, hoping that these small buildings, but demonstrate how architecture can act as the catalyst and generator of the local economy and cultural development. The first projects we have worked on was a funeral hall in a local cemetery named Hall of Immortality. The cemetery mainly serves residents of Jiaozuo city and its rural neighborhood. And the client wanted to build an indoor venue that addresses the growing demand among young generations born in the 80s, the 90s, for spaces where contemporary memorial service can be held, aside from the very traditional Chinese rituals. Its site was triangular in shape, located at the entrance of the cemetery campus, with relatively noisy and chaotic surroundings. Believing that experiencing or witnessing death may be one of the key moments in life that allow us to resituate ourselves in, as well as revisit our relationship with nature, the space was created to be a quiet and introverted shelter for contemplation, a hideout from the noisy and chaotic surroundings where one can focus on intimate emotions, senses, and the fundamental elements of nature that are highlighted in the space. So we have enclosed the plot with high walls, leaving only a narrow slit at one end. One can focus on the fundamental elements of nature in the space, such as the light, the water, the soil, the sky, the rock, and the trees. There are not as these are not where life re-emerges into, but also where it starts from, essentially an infinite cycle. The overhang at the entrance to the main hall is to block the smoke and view from the adjacent incineration area. And one can also sit on the benches under the porch to get a sense of the changing light and shadows through the gap while waiting to enter the main venue. Entering the main hall, light would gradually change from dark to bright, with the skylights on both sides as well as above the altar at the far end. A stream of water connected to the fountain at the entrance flows along the wall and introduces the sound of nature into the space. And the skirting lights are also triangular in plan, corresponding to that of the building. The one-way circulation helps ensuring the privacy of each mourner. And after the ceremony, the mourners can pass through the walkway on the other side to the exit. And they would hear the sound of flowing water at the fountain once again before they leave. In the same county, but another village called Qingchang, we also renovated an old CCP branch office into a community center, as well as built a second phase new addition next to it. The community center is located at the periphery of the village, in between the residential areas to its west and the eastern streets and rye fields. The whole block of the existing CCP building was walled, which separates the residential areas from the eastern traffic and nature. And the pedestrians had to make extra efforts in order to get from one side to the other. We have taken our inspirations from the archetypes of the local traditional earth shelter courtyard dwellings and the planar arches used repeatedly on the facades of the old buildings, and open up the courtyard walls by replacing them with arched veranda, creating a cluster that is open on three sides. Pedestrian experience walking through the site is thus enhanced with the increased porosity, while the cloister has provided a gathering and hangout space for villagers of all age. The arch was taken as a motif that proliferates and reappears here, both exterior and interior. And by veiling the massing of the building with layers of translucent PC panels, we intend to add a sense of lightness and openness so that it would seem more approachable by the villagers. Now the community center not only serves as an office for the local administrative committee, but also a destination where villagers would take a walk to after dinner, or simply hang out during the day, where kids would practice their roller skating skills and the senior ladies rehearse their group dance. It also becomes a popular spot for the village night markets. Following the community center on the west side, the Phase 2 town hall is located directly to its east. While Phase 1 on the west accommodates mostly non-profit service programs and ceremonial spaces, the east side focuses more on the introduction of smaller local businesses as well as cultural and recreational programs. The east side has also adopted the same courtyard-centered configuration, but since it's mostly retail, it was meant to be more intimate, earthly, and effortless. So the massing of the complex is broken up into smaller scale volumes, which follows an asymmetrical layout and leaves multiple accesses in between, continuing and reinforcing the porosity and accessibility from the west. The space here is both a medium and a generator to create potential employment and startup business opportunities for the villagers, exploring an innovative and sustainable model of the economic and cultural revitalization of the rural communities. For example, this is the barbecue restaurant, also serving as a canteen and banquet hall for the villagers. And this is the gallery / children's library. The gallery cafe, as you can see, Phase 2 also plays with the geometry of arches, but in a freer manner to meet the spatial and programmatic needs. The library interior and the store selling local farm produce and handicrafts. So the central multifunctional open space with a basketball court painted with the specially designed graphics is most popular among the teenagers, and it is also used for hosting wedding and birthday ceremonies, and can be transformed into spill-out space for the restaurant, accommodating traditional outdoor banquets where all villagers can dine at the same time. In the villages, we have been very careful with the choice of material. Instead of using novel, experimental, or expensive material, we tend to use the most common ones that is readily available locally, such as the local stone, the stucco, concrete, and paint. The innovation usually lies in the finishes or placement of the material. It is the same conservative strategy that we have taken when we use glass. We always intentionally limit the size of the panels so that it is slightly smaller than those of the common practice in the city. And as compensation, we always calibrate the configuration of the openings and voids so that it does not necessarily call for glass wall that is super transparent with minimum mullions, but rather may benefit from smaller glass modules. As we have been working on the village projects that we have just seen, we also had the privilege to work on some of the non-architectural projects at various scales in the city, such as exhibition and retail interior design. In these projects, because of the program, the available resources, and the fact that they are indoor, we had more liberty in terms of experimenting with the application of new materials. For example, while we were working on the funeral hall, we have completed the interior design of the concept store of the local women's wear brand, Geiyang. The design explores the transmission, refraction, and reflection of light through the application of various translucent, transparent, and reflective material. It was meant to be subtle, elusive, yet clean and clear, like the kind of client that would wear the brand's collection. As the bronze VI color was a kind of seafoam green, green marble and customized terrazzo were also used. The display racks are made of acrylic rods connected by scaffolding couplers, which allows us for its configurations to be adjusted between different seasons. And the last one of the first projects that I'm going to talk about is the spatial design of the exhibition Fashion from Nature, previously displayed in London at the V&A Museum before touring to the Fumihiko Maki Design SeaWorld Culture and Arts Center in Shoko. Echoing to the narrative of the exhibition, the natural views embodied in essentially man-made nature, the gardens have been examined here to evoke reflections upon the relationship between human and nature from a fashion as well as a broader perspective of sustainability. The exhibition spaces consisted of a series of abstract Western and Eastern classical gardens, the Western garden being more perspective-driven, geometrical and symmetrical, while the space of the Chinese section follows a natural approach and seeks the ultimate harmony of man and nature. There's no axis or fixed linear circulation, just like a traditional Chinese ink painting or the gardens in Suzhou. Here, the lightweight and translucent materials such as tie-back, elastic fabrics, and acrylics were used to diminish the presence of the physical entity, to reinforce the abstractness of the space, and to focus the audience attention on the exhibits. And that has been my presentation today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shi, for the wonderful presentation. I'm gonna now invite Damien to join us to participate in the conversation, and Florence and I will join later to moderate the Q&A. Please, Damien.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you, Shi, for inviting me, actually, particularly to sit in with this moderation. It's my honor to be here. Shi, we have known each other for 13 years now, I think. More than that, probably. And I'm always very delighted to look at your work. And your work is always very elegant and really inspiring as well. The thing is, I would like to start off with is that, we shared a similar time at KPF. And also we had a similar background of education in the North American Master of Architecture education. And seeing your work is very different from what people would call the KPF alumni. How we're always being stereotyped with really large scale projects. But by looking at your work is very different in terms of the focus, in terms of the scale. I'm interested to know who did you base on in terms of modeling your practice, and do you also consider your work as academic?
Well, first of all, thank you for calling in from all the way from London. Of course, to answer your question, of course, there are many other boutique practices globally that I really admire and respect. But unfortunately, I've had no firsthand experience working for any of them. Though I would like to mention the first generation of independent practices in China after the opening and reform, such as Atelier 非常建筑, Urbanus, Madasiban, as well as younger generations such as Trace, Vector, DNA, Nod, Neri, and Hu, and so on, who are all still quite active today. And in fact, although the size of the team and the scale and the type of the projects are not comparable, there are many aspects of the practice that was based on the things I have learned or observed at KPF. For example, the belief that every designer should have the opportunity to be exposed to each phase of the project instead of being fixed on a certain phase. The belief that you should be very careful about the selection, the kind of projects to take, and the emphasis on the coordination execution. We even have the same folder structure and nomenclature as KPF.
Right. I remember, when we were chatting, we visit each other's studios a lot. You always select projects. How do you have this luxury of selecting two projects? When I look at the Q&A sessions, Dan is also asking, how did you get the first projects, and how did you choose to have one, and what brings you the first project?
I think, as mentioned, it was I guess I was quite lucky that the curator of the UABB venue was when he knew that I had started my own practice. He was very kind to have given me the opportunity to work on that. And I think I forgot to answer your second question, which was if I consider my work as academic. I would hope so, and it is what we are trying to do, but not necessarily how we select the projects, but we are trying to design through research. Although as a practitioner, I have to be frank that projects are always multifaceted, involving solving all sorts of practical problems as well as meeting the needs of the client, the authorities, the investors, and contractors. So with the given and limited resources, sometimes it's not so much room to on the academic side, but there are other projects that's got more room, to push that.
Sorry, may I ask a question? Tapping into Damien's earlier comments about KPF. So when you look at KPF, I mean, it's certainly founded by people that it's not just one people, but three, right? Doing different aspects of the business. When you start your own business, have you ever thought of partnering with some of your friends or other collaborators to make it into a more like a divisions of the works kind of practice versus like a solo practice? Did you have that kind of a struggle or consideration before you come out and start your own practice?
I think I have always been open to partnership, but I think finding a good partner is very hard. It requires a lot of compromise, and since we are already making so many compromises as we deal with the projects, the practical side, as I mentioned, I think it's okay that to be a solo practice, but as mentioned, I'm always open to partnership if I could find a partner that's like the perfect match, and that neither party feels that he or she is making compromise.
Right. I would just keep writing on the KPF background because we shared that, when you first started with these small, modest projects, right? How did people react to your background? Say, okay, you're a KPF. How come you take this kind of project?
I think, as you mentioned, because the type of project that we would like to work on is very different from my background. Like we get a lot of doubts, like from potential clients, like why would you want to work on projects like this, or do you have the ability to work on that, or do you only know how to work on the big projects? So I think we spend a lot of time building our portfolio, winning the trust of the clients before we get less of such doubts. Yeah. No.
So follow up with Dan's questions. He asked about, you get the first project through commission or through competition or through friends, and how did you get that?
It was a commission. Yeah, it was commissioned because
so connection wins everything. So
a smaller project. Yeah, which is, I guess, another advantage of working on the smaller projects, because as soon as the project goes to a certain scale, it requires open competition.
Okay, cool. So can I shift the gear to my another questions that were really about your design? So you mentioned about design through research. We were taught that in Boston, people really focus on design through research, pedagogy, aggregation, all these jargon. Now, you mentioned a lot of interest in materials and constructions. What is your creative process like? How did you start a project?
So when we approach a new project, as you have observed, material usually comes into play at very early stage of the design process, almost concurrent as the first solution was conceived. We would also spend a lot of time researching on the potential material, looking at precedents, working with the contractors and suppliers to test on the mock-ups and samples. Sometimes you could say that the material selection and configuration become the most crucial point of some of our projects, or even like the point of departure, such as the mosaic wall restoration in our very first UAVB sub-venue project.
Mm-hmm. So, but then when I look at the body of works, right? So I also mentioned that to you before. When you work on interior projects, I kind of sense that you put a lot of emphasis in a very particular exploration. In particular, for example, when you do the interior projects for the is very particular about the colors, reflections, and so on. But then shifting the scale from the interior space, a 90 meters square, to a architectural design, I personally see that change and shift in terms of the focus. One is from the mature contrast, playfulness of colors, to the expression of form and space and light. Is it a natural shift, or is it an intentional exploration on different medium in architectural representation?
I think it's both a natural shift and intentional. Intentional in the sense that, like as mentioned in the village projects, we have tested with applying the most common affordable material to kind of create a sensory experience. Because we were being very conservative with the selection of or use of innovative materials. So we decided to only use the most common ones. So the exploration actually focuses more on the combination, the placement of the material and its treatment. So if you look at the cemetery project, the walls were actually finished with earth tone stucco, but with a very rough texture to evoke the soil or the local semi-underground cave dwellings. and the floor was also finished with rubbed granulous paving, whose aggregates were actually made from local sandstone, but bears the same color as the characteristic pinkish sandstone of the local landscape. And I do believe that innovative use of material and expression of this volume and space, it could be mutually exclusive. It could be mutually like complementary.
Right. I mean,
I just
please.
quickly add to, just very quickly add to this discussion about the formal and material quality of Shi's work. I'm gonna just very quickly read this comments and question from Nelson. Nelson Chen, thank you for an inspiring presentation. Your work, especially Qinchang Village Town Hall, impresses me for having an elemental quality that is both contemporary and timeless, somewhat reminiscent of Monet arches, barrel vaults, and super thin colonnades, and Liu Yichun concrete half arches, though more smooth and sleek than either. So the question from Nelson is, who are some of the architects whose work you admire and who have influenced your design approach? Yep.
There are many, but I actually, while at GSD, I took both a class and also a seminar from Professor Monel. Yeah, and I think his works and his theory has very deep influence on me. Also, some of the European architects like Carlos Gapa, and also I think I'm very like drawn to the work of Louis Barragan. Just to name a few, yeah.
Right. I mean, continuing with the question about the village projects, just keep writing on the conversation. The work is beautiful and kind of pure. How did you bring this particular design to a rural area? Supposedly they might be a little bit more Chinese, or kind of the taste would be different.
I think it is a good question. I think it's you are referring to, like, you have touched many aspects of the practice. For instance, the communication of the design ideas to the client and the representation of it, faced with different kinds of client. We actually had used all necessary media to facilitate that, including renderings and videos. In the funeral hall project, we had two options at the conceptual stage, one circular and the other triangular in plan. The owner first wanted to go with the circular option, but after seeing the video of the walkthrough that we have made, she actually went with the triangular one because she said the angles and the straight walls in the scheme seem to be a source of strength for those walking through the space. And I think your question was also about the relationship between academic research of the discipline and the practice, and whether there's a gap in between. For me, designing through the research should not be about the profound concepts in the ivory tower that are difficult to understand, but rather something very closely related to solving the very basic problems encountered in the everyday life. For example, the sunlight, the air, the privacy or openness, and the cost, and the look, and as well as how popular it will be once completed. And I think these issues are the same for both people in the city or in the village. So I think it's just approaching them with the common sense and the basic concerns in life.
Well, I think it's nice that you can work with the clients and the clients that understand you and that they are convinced with your approach. I think that's beautiful. And being women in architecture, especially in China, do you come across with any kind of difficulties or conflicts, especially when you go into a rural area, you know, you're pointing to the workers, oh, I need this and I need that. How did they react to it? And how would you cope with, you know, some sort of maybe stereotypes of some sort?
If you're referring to the injustice or discrimination or harassment against women, personally, I don't immediately recall any such incident in my career. Maybe I have just been really lucky, or there might have been, but I just didn't realize it. However, I'm aware that exists, and I have also witnessed some of it. So at our office, we currently have more female staff than men. And from the first day of its founding, we have been trying to keep the system and the environment as equitable as possible towards both genders. We also have a zero tolerance policy towards any kind of discrimination or harassment. And I have to say that throughout my career, I have been guided, inspired, encouraged, assisted, and elevated by so many women, both in and outside of the industry. In fact, I would personally be very interested to work on a project that addresses this issue of equality from an architectural or spatial perspective.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds great. I mean, I'm really happy to see more female architects working, you know, very successfully in China. And then, you know, the question I always would like to ask you, because since you really academic and you're doing great work, how come you didn't teach?
Sorry?
How come you didn't teach? Did you not wanted to go into the academia?
I think that comes back to the Florence's question of having a partner, because we are I'm a sole practitioner. It was just the first 5 years of the practice. So I think my focus was still on surviving and making sure that the practice is on the right track. And I didn't have energy to spare, frankly. But maybe one day I'll be able to handle both. Yeah, with my multitasking skills learned from KPF.
Florence could add to that because Florence is super duper in that.
Yeah. Well, there are also some more questions from the floor. Some probably an easier one for you, Shi, from Edwin. What is the meaning behind Studio 10?
It was 10 because in Chinese 10 is in Mandarin 10 is pronounced as Shi. So and also yeah.
Now mystery solved.
Climax, yeah.
I see. Great. And then another one, which is coming from Vicky Chen, our past president. What is your management method to keep a team of 10 people? During the pandemic, everyone wants to work for big firms. for a stable income and other company benefits. I know Vicky is thinking of that, but what is your thought on it?
I don't know, but I feel like 10 to 15 people is probably the maximum one person can manage if she or he tries to like have an in-person management. Yeah. At Studio 10, we do not have much hierarchy, and everyone, it's more like a studio where you can people like the young designers, they can just grab me and ask me to critique, or just come up to my desk and say something. Yeah. And in terms of like people wanting to work for the big firms, I think those who chose to work for the smaller firms, they probably already know or that that they want to work for the smaller ones. While if he or she is still trying to decide, they may not stay for long. Yeah. So those who stay, they're already like there's a natural selection process where these people are like the small office people.
Right.
Actually,
I
it
just
ties
want.
into, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay, because your studio is in Shenzhen, primarily in Shenzhen. Shenzhen is such a fast-paced city, and you have a studio of 10 people. We check about it. You experience difficulties of retaining or keeping the talents. Do you still experience that, or how do you do it to avoid this kind of loss of talents in your studio?
So sorry.
Oh, sorry, maybe I missed that. Your studio is in Shenzhen, right? Yeah, your studio is in Shenzhen, and then Shenzhen is notorious for people shifting around. They don't stay. And then, how did you cope with that for your studio?
I think it's like every architectural studio needs to face that, but it's probably harder for smaller offices, because I remember in KPF there was this theory about like having a deep bench and you are just part of this system that like automates. But in a smaller office, it's more difficult to do that. But what we try to do is to say make everything like systematic, either record by a template or like written down, like keeping good record of things, so that even if some of the designer they are leaving, they can like the predecessor can find where the things are. Yeah. As a as a measure, precautionary measure.
Yeah. Yeah. There's another questions for Shi. When did you start having this idea of starting your own practice? Was it while you were at work, or when you were even back in school? Have you been constantly thinking about doing your own practice, or maybe one day when you're working in KPF and then you're like, I'm so done with it, and then you start your own practice?
I think even when I was at school, I knew that, or my wish, my best hope was to have my own practice. And I'm really grateful that my professional experience at KPF has, I have to say, prepared me really well for that. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, I also would like to read another question from Dan, which I also would like to ask. You know, what is your goal in the next 5 to 10 years, seeing your practice moving, you know, forward? Would you like to take on bigger projects, or would you like to stay in this particular scale? And if you would like to stay in this particular scale, why? And why would you choose to go bigger? And if you're choosing to go for bigger, what is your ambitions? You know,
I think we'll probably the size of the projects that we take probably won't go bigger than, say, a medium-sized project. I think the goal is to take the same scale projects, but maybe as we build up our portfolio and the practice keeps developing, we would have more room or more freedom to work on the projects. Yeah.
Right. I can see your answer because you turned down a lot of projects and passed on to me, the bigger one. I said you turned down a lot of big projects and said, "Oh, I'm not doing it. Damien, why don't you take it?" I said, "Okay, I will do that." Yeah. So that was
the. But that has something to do with the size of the team, the capacity of the team. I think it's also why we prefer to take on smaller projects and keep a smaller team, because then there's more flexibility. While if we decide to take on bigger projects, it sounds very intriguing, but we would have to expand the team. Yeah. And it will be over the limit where I think I can manage.
And the crucial question now down to this is, are these small projects profitable? Are they, you know, could they sustain the office?
It really depends on the typology. For example, if a small project that's like a commercial interior, it's actually okay. But if it's an architectural project in the rural area, as you might be able to imagine, it's not as profitable. But there's always a balance. We would take on some of the more profitable projects, and then which allows us to work on some of the less profitable ones.
Mm-hmm. So how many projects are you working on concurrently right now? Do you mind sharing?
They're all at different phases, but it's around 8 to 10. Some of them are at the construction administration phase, while some of them are still at a very initial or pre-design phases.
Maybe to continue that discussion, just to pair with a question from Winston in the chat box. So you have several projects going on. You know, you also been starting for the office for like 5 years. When you develop these material research, are they project specific, or are they, you know, ongoing within your office?
Most of them are project specific, but we also have some spontaneous ongoing like material research that we carry out just for fun or for the sake of interest. Yeah.
I have a questions about your town hall projects in the village. I mean, there was a picture in your presentation that was more like the existing, like the town hall. And you can say like, this is the kind of like fairly traditional town hall aesthetics that the village are used to, right? And also like you are dealing with probably the villagers and also like government officials to get that project done, who might have very different ideas about what they used to have for a town hall. So in your design process, how did you, or was it difficult in conveying your idea to the so-called the client to accept your ideas? Especially like considering that you are a fairly young architect, right? Sometimes when you are like big and famous, it is easier to convince your client to accept something, or maybe they come to you because of your credibility. But being such a young architect, did you run into challenge in convincing or getting your ideas executed?
Yes, actually, for example, the village project that you have mentioned, it has deviated from the traditional acceptable CCP. But I think the advantage of for us here is that first of all, the mayor of the county came to us because they liked the other place project, the one that went on the Time magazine cover. So that was like a small but convincing evidence for them. And secondly, because they came to us, he came to us knowing that we were very young and we had little real project experience compared with some of the other more prestigious firms, but they were looking for this new idea. So this completely overturning aesthetics for the local, because they thought that's how it will be popular and help the county to attract tourists' attention. Yeah. So we were quite lucky that the top official of the county actually supported us, regardless of what the other people say. And I think at the end, when it was built, the crowds there actually spoke for itself, so that the doubts, vanished a bit.
Yeah, that's a lovely project.
One more question from the audience, also from Winston. So one question, if anyone in the audience will ask themselves, if they look to start their own practice, what would that question you would, suggest asking?
Are you, do you really like architecture enough that you can bear the solitude, the hardship, and both psychologically and physically during this process of starting your studio? Yeah. Or in other words, why do you want to start your own studio? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have that moment of reflection after you start your studio? Or how did you overcome it, if you have?
I think it's always like the hardship and the difficulties are always balanced off by the joy you take from like creation or designing, yeah, or seeing your projects being built and benefiting the villagers or the users.
Mhm. It actually inspired me of another question, maybe not for you right now, but maybe for you 5 years ago when you first started. Did you have an exit plan when you first started your office? I'm sure you don't need it now, but like because you have a lot of projects going on. But when you first started, do you prepare like an exit plan in case in 5 years, 3 years, 10 years?
I think Florence actually offered me with an exit plan. Like, if you want to come back, you're always welcome. Thank you.
Okay, I have an exit plan B.
Yeah, we joke about this Chulu, right? Yeah, yeah. Now we're inside the jokes now. Yeah, but definitely you walk a really, really bright Chulu path and inspire us. As Edwin has made a statement, you are an inspiration for many of us, giving us your amazing ideas and inspiration. I think that's really well said. And I have been following your work, your published work. I'm always being, wow, she did it again.
I do want to go to that village that have the town hall in it.
Actually, Damien was an inspiration for me because I think you started you started your own practice a few years earlier than me, right? So yeah, I think seeing you like your practice grow and hearing your stories actually made me believe that maybe I could do it as well.
Well, I'm flattered, but I'm nothing compared to what you have achieved. But yeah, but thank you. Yeah, thank you. I took part of your journey. Thanks. Yeah, I will leave questions to the floor. I have no more questions from my side.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions from anyone? Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Florence, Damien, for joining us for discussion. Thank you, Shi, for the very, very beautiful presentation, inspiring sharing. This is a wonderful beginning of the year. Wonderful to kick off all the programs and events this year with your talk. And we look forward to welcome everyone back for more events this year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shi. Thank you, Damien.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.